9 o'clock, and we'll call the Barron County Board of Supervisors for Monday, March 18th, 2024 into order and have a roll call. Pam Fall and Gary won't be here.
Yep, I've got her marked.
And you got Pete as well? Okay. You gonna announce it or? Jess, you gonna announce that? Stacy.
All right, so we currently have 21 present and 2 absent, with Pam Fall absent and Gary Taxtell is absent.
Okay. Public notification.
Wendy Coleman, my executive assistant, has complied with Wisconsin open meeting requirements. Meeting agendas have been posted on the electronic meeting notice boards located on the first and second floor of the Government Center and the first floor of the Justice Center. A hard copy of the meeting agenda has been posted in the county clerk's office, and she's verified the proper posting of the meeting. This is the Barron County Board of Supervisors meeting for March, scheduled for March 18th, and this agenda was posted on March 12th at 3:48 p.m.
Okay, the invocation will be by Pastor Arthur Bergren from Bethany Lutheran in Rice Lake.
This morning, my wife and I live on Rice Lake, and we had an otter show up. And I was sort of struck by the beauty of it. And so my prayer today is going to be around the beauty of Barron County. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you for the beauty that makes up the fullness of Barron County. We thank you for the land, for the water. We thank you for all the animals that live within the confines, both those that are wild and those that are domesticated. We thank you for the beauty of all of the people who live in this place. We ask that you would bless the fullness of all of our residents in Barron County. Now, Lord, be with the fullness of this board, that the choices and decisions they make would be in support of all of the beauty that surrounds us here in this great place. This we pray in God's holy name. Amen. God bless your meeting.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks again, Pastor. Okay, special matters and announcements.
I just wanted to mention some things on Lana's senior dining site that's been in existence now for 1 year, very successful. 4,127 meals served. They serve from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Thursdays, and it's reached more than 714 older adults, which is part of our Aging ADRC program and keeping people out of restricted living and keeping them in congregate situations, which helps their living. So thank you.
And a special thanks to Supervisor Patty Anderson, who's kind of the lead dog on this whole thing and done an excellent job. And I know ADRC is working to possibly do this on some other sites as well, because it is a very important and needed item. Okay, number 4, approve the agenda. Motion by Supervisor Bob Anderson, seconded by Supervisor Gores. Any concerns or questions with the agenda? Not, all those in favor of approving, vote. Okay, that passed by a majority vote of 27 yes and 2 absent. Item number 5, approve the minutes of February 19th, 2024. Any concerns with the minutes? Seeing none, let's vote.
Stacy from virtual, yours isn't showing up again. Thank you.
Okay, it passed by majority again, 27 yes and 2 absent, so the minutes are approved. Number 6, public comment. We do have one, Nancy Keeler. Nancy, would you come up to the podium where the pastor was and state your name and address, please?
My name is Nancy Keeler from 996 20 and 3/4 Avenue, Cumberland. So I thank you for all your service. I wanted to address the remodel of the Barron County Housing Authority apartments at $3.2 million. So I am Keeler Rental Properties. We're landlords in town. We have over 130 units. And we have bought government property. We did buy Impact 7, James Manor Estates out of Cameron, maybe 10 years ago. And we did remodel them, and so I'm not fighting the remodel, I'm fighting the cost of it. Because when we remodeled those apartments, we could remodel them for like $10,000 an apartment. And so we were doing all the work, so maybe add up to $20,000. But for $3.2 million, I think that's way too high. And we also stayed with all local. I called a couple supervisors and they said, well, it's grant money, it's free from the government. Nothing is free from the government. Right? We end up paying the money that comes from the government. So I'm asking you please not to pass the $3.2 million for the Barron County Housing Authority remodel. I'm not opposed to the remodel, it's the price of that. Also, last time I came, I raised my hand and he said, well, follow the builder out. And I did follow the builder out. And then I told him what I just told you and he just smiled at me. And it's like, I think you could go local builders for much cheaper and have a great remodel for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Item number 7, recognition of the retiring county board supervisors. As you know, we had Jerry McRoberts recognized last time. And after I'm done saying something here, we're going to go back and take a picture of the 3 retiring supervisors that are here. First one will be Stan Buchanan. He started in 2012, and so he's been with us 12 years. Next one is Dale Heineke. He started in 2009, so he's been with us 15 years. Then Stacy Newman, who was with us 2012 to 2014 and 2023 to 2024, so that's 3 years. And then Gary Taxdahl, who would normally be online, but he had family matters today, so he's not there. But he's retiring, he started in 2016, so he's been here 8 years. So if Stan and Dale and Stacy would come back against the wall there on my left, we'll get a picture with, I'll hand you a plaque.
Say government cheese.
They're all smiling.
Okay, item number 8, the SEH presentation on the Barron County Housing Authority Rehabilitation Project is, who's going to do that? Bob? Dan? Is Dan here? Hi, Dan. You want to step up to the podium? Just give them your name and who you are. And
Yes, good morning. I'm Dan Penscover from SEH in Rice Lake. Before you this morning, in your packet, you have a memo that we developed for the county for your Barron County Housing Authority project. we were contacted by Mr. French to take a look at this project from a third-party review standpoint. Our findings are summarized in the memo. Also on the call with me virtually is Mr. Joe Schwenker, who's our low-income housing development specialist that reviewed that part of the aspect of the overall project. And I'll paraphrase the memo. I know it's in your packet, and Mr. French also has added to the front of that memo. On page 1, the structure of our project and the low-income housing tax credit transactions fairly typical for a rehabilitation project of this nature, and there's no disputing that the project improvements are needed. I mean, we'll state that right up front. We don't disagree with the project at all. We participated in a meeting with Mr. Bob Kazmersky, the developer, the general contractor, and Barron County Housing Authority on February 5th, a value engineering meeting basically to kind of go through the whole project. We were brought in late in the project just to look at all the documents that were available at that time. We also reviewed building plan sets from the architect Martin Riley that were dated July 21st, 2023. Basically have 3 types of buildings that are being remodeled or proposed to be remodeled. The Barron family duplexes, which are a total of 6 units. There's 8-unit complexes in scattered sites or various sites around the county, and 5 of those for a total of 40 units. And then the main Berger Woodland property in Barron here, which is 24 units. So we looked at all the information that was provided, and as summarized on page 2 of the memo, we broke down basically a per unit cost for each set of plans for the structures that were provided to us. And those are summarized in your packet. They seemed high from what we could tell. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. So we can't dispute the cost because the plans are very detailed, they're comprehensive, feel like nothing was missed there. It's just the overall cost of the whole project seemed to be on the high end. We are still dealing with some supply chain issues. There are some labor issues as well. So a lot of factors could play into that role. The costs that we receive from the general contractor are then summarized in the table on the top of page 2. We also kind of looked at each general area of construction, just from a broad, high-level basis. The demolition costs seem somewhat high. We talked about that at our committee meeting and with the meeting with staff. General construction seems normal. There was also value engineering that was done on February 5th to address potential costs that could or could not be removed from the project. And Mr. Kazmersky, I'm sure, will touch on that a little bit more. In general, we summarized the costs for the duplexes. I will note an error in our calculations were pointed out early this morning. The per square foot cost is incorrect for the 8 units. However, the per unit cost is correct in that summary table, so I want to point that out to you. And then as we go through it, Mr. Schwenker is on the call, and I guess I would like to have him just kind of talk high level what he found from the housing low-income tax credit part of the application, the WHEDA application, and some of the things that we discussed from that nature. Joe, if you would, please.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, members of the board. As Dan mentioned, excuse me, my name is Joe Schwenker, and I'm a consultant in the tax credit industry. And I'll echo Dan's earlier comment. There's no question that there's an overwhelming need for properties of this type. There's an overwhelming need for the preservation of properties of this type. And when we looked at the financial structure of this transaction, it is fairly typical. And we in the industry kind of label it lasagna financing because there's multiple layers. As you'll see in the memo before you, I think there's probably seven different sources of funding for this transaction. The main driver of the transaction is 4% tax credits, which are allocated by WHEDA. All of the funding sources that are contemplated for this transaction have been applied for in various forms of approval. However, the only true commitment that the project has right now is from the Federal Home Loan Bank in Chicago, which is an affordable housing program investment of $900,000. I don't know how granular the board wants to get because it gets, tax credit deals can get pretty detailed. I will say in general that the project, the way the financial structure is laid out is fairly common. I think the board, when we talked internally, Dan, and some of the other SEH folks, really comes down to a couple of questions. One is, do you want to continue to go to the course and invest the ARPA money into the project? Do you want to go for a 9% credit? And this gets fairly detailed. And we did have a discussion with Mr. French about the 9% credit. It's a competitive application process. Happens in December. Could you go with the 9%, rehab a fair amount of the project, and then have the 9% basically take the place of the ARPA dollars that you currently have in the deal? So those are kind of the two options: is go the course you're working down now, or pivot and hope that you get a 9% deal and you can rehab a majority of the project, maybe not all of the project. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, or if there's anything that I need to take a deeper dive on, I certainly am happy to do that for you.
Does anybody have any questions? I know Tom Landgraf has been our consultant on this project for several years. He's done an excellent job for us. But due to COVID, supply chain issues, and a lot of other things, items have been delayed. And so at the request of some of the board members here, we had SEH do basically a review of what we're doing and to do our due diligence. And I guess what I would say found from that is they pretty much agree with the structure of the project and what we're doing. It's just they do have some current concerns about the basically the cost. And later on item number 10, we'll be asking you to either approve the resolution as stated there to go forward with the project, or to, as Jeff had in his separate memo, to basically postpone it to a time certain and give us the time to research more of what we're talking about here. Because some of the things were that 9% LIHTC credit is a competitive thing. In their wisdom, the government is said that it's a level playing field between urban and rural, but that's not true. It's slanted toward urban and towards, people who live in town. They give you points for having, mass transit, libraries, grocery stores, that kind of things. When we have scattered sites all over rural America or rural Barron County, you can't get some of the points that they can. So therefore, we didn't get the 9%, and which is competitive. We did receive the 4%, and that we do have an equity investor who has indicated they would do the 4% for us. The AHP loan, that's a forgivable loan that right now we have for $900,000 from the Home Loan Bank. Right now, they can go up to $2 million. So if we wait, maybe we can get some more money that way. Rules for the solar. Tom Landgraf has done a lot of research on that, but it's just like the government's typical way they handle things. They've got money for solar projects, but they don't have any rules. You can't apply for it if you don't know what they don't have all the rules out for you. Interest rates are something that, it's hard to predict, but as most of you realize, it sounds like the interest rates could be coming down. And because of the current project, we have had to, because of the cost, we've had to they call it value engineering, but it really is diminishing the end product with less dishwashers, garages, paving, that kind of thing. So, so a second alternative, which we'll have on item number 10, will be Jeff indicated a motion to table this item for us to review these things. So that's kind of where we're at. Would you agree with that, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any questions right now? Supervisor Cook?
Yeah, Joseph mentioned this 9%, and you did as well, Louis. we can reapply for this 9%, and we wouldn't know about that until September? How does it work? I mean, you talk about a point system. If it's dead, why would we look at it? I mean, is it something that can be, that
As,
we have a
as
shot?
with Jeff in his memo there, they're going to restructure this thing where we have 30 units that are in the city of Barron. We're going to use those particular units in the city and go after that 9%. The other, then you've got another 40 units that are scattered throughout the sites. We'll be reallocating the funds, most of the ARPA funds, to do that rehab. So we're targeting our application to hopefully get the 9% on the city of Barron apartments. There were 30 of them.
And then you would, what you're saying then is then we would just reallocate that part of that 3.5 million to the rest of the project?
Correct. You know, in a simplistic view, yes. You know, and yes, but that's the idea. Is that, Dan, would you agree with that too, and Bob?
Yeah, I think that was the discussion, yes.
No. Okay. Any further questions? All right, thanks. Oh, sorry, Supervisor Newman.
Would you be so kind as to repeat the square footages that were, the prices that were correct versus incorrect?
Yes.
Please.
On page 1, 2, on page 3, the 8-unit complex, various sites, the square foot cost was stated incorrectly as quite high on that one. It's closer to $150 per square foot on that one. The other unit costs are correct that were previously stated in that portion of the memo.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks, Dan, and thanks, Joe. You did an excellent job. We appreciate the job you did. Oh, Audrey, you have a question?
So numerous times in your report, you talk about the things, costs that seem high compared to what you've seen other places and with your expertise. How do we go about addressing that? I mean, it's a bid project, so we take what we have, we rebid, we change something. How do we get those more in line with what other people are seeing versus what this project is appearing to come in at?
Well, I'm not sure it was entirely a bid project. There was cost from a general contractor, so maybe Mr. Landgraf and Kazmersky will address that a little bit more. Yeah, the details weren't, the numbers that were provided to us were what we had to work with. So as indicated, some of these supply chain issues are coming down, and maybe the reallocating, looking for other bids or costs from other contractors may help. There's never a guarantee, though, as we indicated in there as well, as it just, from the grand high level, everything seems high.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Supervisor Heller.
I had a question in regards to the 9% to 5%, if that's reduced, or I mean from 5%,
9 and 4.
4% up to 9%. If we're eligible for that and it's granted, would that not reduce the total that we're having to allocate to everything?
Yes.
So then instead of just reallocating, it's going to reduce the total.
It
outlay.
will reduce our total borrowing, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the same thing as if that solar project, if that would, we could garner some of that money, because right now we don't have any of that. And I don't know, Tom, do you want to maybe even speak to that, where we're at with the solar funds at this time? Is there anything you can really say that's changed, or if you want to come up to the mic and maybe Tom, just tell them who you are and.
Good morning. Tom Landgraf. I've been working, as you know, with the Housing Authority for a number of years now to kind of sort this out and figure out where we're at. To Chairman Oki's point, the solar money that the entire country is waiting on is about $39.7 billion. That was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's administered by the EPA. They promised to have the rules out late last year. They missed that deadline, and then it was going to be early this year. Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation applied on behalf of the entire state for a chunk of that money. I believe it's about $65 million. And when I talked to the WEDC folks last week, they said the EPA has indicated that they will make the announcement by the end of this month. So sometime between now and the end of the month, you'll probably see a news item come across. It'll be probably Wisconsin awarded, because it's a big grant that'll come in to WEDC, and then they will have rules and regulations on how to distribute it. It's for corporations, individuals, profits, nonprofits. It's basically a chunk of bucks for solar for the whole state. To say there will be a food fight over that money would be an understatement. But we're going to do our part of the fighting for some for the property here. And the reason that that's important is the heat in all 70 of the units that the Barron County Housing Authority has is electric baseboard heat. And you know that that's the most expensive heat there is available. And costs of it are not projected to be going down. The vast majority of the residents that live in the property are on a fixed income. And they rely basically on the cost increases that they get, or the revenue increases they get from Social Security. And most of the forecasts that you could find if you just Googled it would show you Social Security going up probably at the rate of the targeted inflation, which is 2 to 3%, and electric rates going up probably double that. So each year the residents lose a little ground in that regard unless something can be done with regard to the electric baseboard heat. Either put in enough solar to offset that cost or take it out completely, which is what's in the budget right now, and go to a different source that's more energy efficient. And that's one of the things that drives the cost up. The other thing is the properties haven't really had any major rehab since they were built 48 years ago. So if you bought a house 48 years ago and didn't do much to it, and now you want to sell it, and the realtor comes in and says, hey, put this on the market, you got to put some cash in, it's not going to be just a couple of bucks. And the extent of the deferred maintenance, and it's not the housing authority's fault, HUD just doesn't give them enough money, so they encourage them to go out and do these kinds of things. And typically, it's a big ticket. And just, I'll say one more thing before I stop. We talk a lot about costs. WEDA administers the tax credit program, and they do it statewide. And they have limits that they set for developers and organizations like the Housing Authority based on what type of property it is and where the property is located. And they set what they call maximum costs per unit. And you cannot exceed those maximum costs. And those maximum costs are set by WEDA, in their view, to be an appropriate amount of money to do a good job, especially for rehab projects like we have right here. In 2024, WEDA set the maximum cost for projects like Barron County at $289,000 a unit. Now that's their view as the Housing Finance Agency statewide on what a maximum cost would be. So that gives you some idea of what the top end is. Now, just because that's the top end doesn't mean you have to spend the top end. And the budget that the Housing Authority has right now is about $2.7 million below that max cost. So even though the numbers seem high, compared to what the State Housing Finance Agency sets as the maximum based on everything they see, and they've been administering the tax credit program since 1986, so they got a pretty good database. That's basically where they're at. So one of the things that we'll have to sort through is, as Chairman Oakey mentioned, look at the value engineering. Perhaps the electric baseboard heat stays. Perhaps there aren't garages. Perhaps there aren't some other things. But as far as the costs go, while They seem significant, and I'm not trying to downplay them, but the bids that we have on all the projects were built, or largely local contractors. That was the goal of the Housing Authority, to do the best job they could using local pricing. And those are the bids we have right now. So we'll be looking at maybe expanding the bidding pool and looking at what's in the project. You know, it's not likely to go higher, but it will go lower. So that's basically where we're at right now.
Supervisor Cook?
So if this 3.5 million would have never happened, what would have been the plan to rehab these units? We haven't done it in 48 years. What would the plan have been to rehab them going forward?
The original plan was to apply for the competitive tax credits, which the Housing Authority did in 2022. And as Chairman Oki indicated, the scoring is tilted toward urban. The Housing Authority was not successful with that competitive application. That application didn't have as much need for the $3.5 million. It would use some of it, but not all of it. The second alternative is to go for what's called the automatic credit. So there's no competition. You apply for it, you meet the WHEDA's rules, and you basically get the credit. That's the 4% credit. But to make the 4% credit work, the full ARPA allocation of $3.5 million goes in. So if the Housing Authority, regardless of how many times they apply, is unsuccessful on the competitive, the ARPA funds would likely be needed to be able to do an appropriate amount of rehab. Now, the other number, if you want to write one down, and perhaps it goes to your question, is what's the bottom end? How far down could you push the budget and still be able to apply for tax credits? Because WHEDA, while they set the maximum cost, they also set the minimum cost. So they don't want what is referred to as a rinse and hold rehab. You know, you got dirty dishes, you hit the rinse and hold button, but you don't use those dishes for the next dinner party. They don't want a housing development at the rinse and hold level, because that means they're going to be constantly having to put money in to kind of keep up. They require a third-party analysis of basically what that minimum is. And the Housing Authority had that done by an architectural and engineering firm who crawled through every square inch of the properties and came up with the number. That number is $9,140,000 in 2022, and if it escalates up at the rate that Dan was talking about with inflation and supply chain, it goes up to about 10.7. If we don't come in with an application to WHEDA at least the minimum cost, we'll get it back. We're at 12.6 now. 10.7 is the minimum, so that $2 million is in flux. And if that can be funded with some grants, the solar grant that will hopefully come down, that's where it is. But taking it below the $9 million isn't worth the effort to figure it out, because WHEDA will say, hey, you're at the minimum. It's called a CNA, a capital needs analysis. HUD requires it, rural development requires it, WHEDA requires it. Every state that I've ever looked at tax credits in required. It's pretty much an industry standard. So that would be the long answer to your question about $10 million.
I do appreciate that, and everybody in here will attest. I crunch numbers, and I crunch them hard. So what you are saying, or at least I'm being led to believe, and maybe it's a wrong assumption, the rent that we collect plus what it's subsidized by HUD is not enough money to maintain these facilities.
Correct.
So had we not get to 3.5 million, in another 46 years, these buildings would be, the roofs would cave in.
Probably before that.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Turcott?
Could you clarify just more for information, the credentialing that some of these subs have to have? I know that elevates the cost. The other is this prevailing wage?
Congress did not require that any project funded with the Affordable Housing Tax Credit meet the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements. Now, as you know, a lot of the money coming through Inflation Reduction Act, that solar will, but that doesn't taint the whole project. It's just the solar. So the project was bid with whatever the prevailing wage is here, whether that is Davis-Bacon. I mean, sometimes prevailing wage is higher than Davis-Bacon, and sometimes it's lower. One of the things we did was that the Housing Authority did was, instead of contractors, and I think we have a couple of them in the room, frequently, if they're going to have a decent-sized contract, have to have a letter of credit or a performance bond that if they get hired to put in the HVAC system, it's going to be right. And if it's not right, the Housing Authority has some backup to the contractor and their work. Frequently, smaller mom and pop type contractors can't afford or get a letter of credit or a bond. And you have a really good opportunity for a lot of mom and pops because, as Dan mentioned, 40 of the 70 units are scattered in 5 different communities. They're in 8-unit buildings. If there was ever a mom and pop opportunity for somebody, it's an 8-unit building. Burger Woodland, which is 24 units, 2 stories, not every contractor is going to be able to handle that one. So to open it up for the mom and pops, we required that the general contractor put a bond using their balance sheet in place for all of the subs. So any person who was bidding was not required to have a bond or a letter of credit. And that hopefully opened it up for a lot of smaller players that could work on it. The Davis-Bacon rules would only apply to certain types of funding, but we're assuming that all of the contractors that responded to the bids that were out were at least paying prevailing wage, which is what they would typically be doing. And you know, we've got 6 different cities that the bidding is in, so there could be some differences as to what electrical work costs in one place versus another.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Any further questions? Supervisor Banks.
You do all this work and you still got an old building. At what point does a agency decide that you tear everything down and start from scratch and get new buildings up to today's standards? Is that ever a consideration, or do we rehab something and then in 40 years rehab it again? In the end, you still got old buildings.
Well, that's true. Your buildings are 48 years old right now. New construction, for instance, the development that was done in Barron, which is new construction, tax credit funded development, using the competitive tax credit, had costs well in excess of what the rehab costs would be. The other issue that you have, which is a very real problem. You could decide to build a 70-unit new building, as you suggested, someplace in Barron County, or you could replace the buildings where they're located. The 2 sets of buildings in Barron and the 5 sets of buildings out in other communities. If you're going to put the new buildings on the same site as the old buildings, all 70 residents are going to have to be relocated because their building is going to get torn down and a new building is going to get put up. And the reality is, and you know Barron County better than I do, where would you put 70 residents for close to 2 years while their buildings are replaced? So the alternative to that is to find other sites. And those cost money. There's a local zoning, other approvals. It would take a reasonably long time to be able to replicate what you have right now. So that's why housing authorities typically, and I only work with housing authorities, so that they are my only clients. What they typically face in a situation like this is doing the best job they can to fix them up, and to fix them up to not just the rinse and hold standard, but to actually really fix them up, to make them is essentially as good as a new building would be. That costs money. That's another reason you see the higher cost. So if you look at three different, at the bookend, the highest cost is brand new. The lowest cost is just do enough to get by, but you're always going to be plagued with problems. And the other one is somewhere in the middle. And that's what the Housing Authority is going to be looking at, is how to move that middle piece to figure out what is the minimum, what is ideal, and what works within the budget. So that's really the, you can't really go to ground zero and start over again, because if the buildings were empty, it'd be real easy. But figuring out what to do with 70 residents, and someone asked the question at the previous meeting I was at, and I think they had a good flavor for how it works. In the 8-unit buildings, in the 24-unit building at Burger Woodland, the support group for the older adults and folks with disabilities, because those buildings are age restricted. You have to be old enough or have a disability to be there. It's not just anybody who wants to show up and say, I'd like to rent a unit. Their support group is their neighbor. So if you have to disperse the residents to a lot of different places, they lose their support group. And if they don't have families and friends, putting them in a hotel or motel, if you had enough, it doesn't really deal with the support. So you have to also consider the people. And, you know, as the saying goes, it gets complicated. And I can see you holding your head thinking, oh, why did I ask that question? So it's, right. Yeah, it's more than just about cost. I mean, cost is you can jump on that, but, you know, at the end of the day, when you start peeling away the layers, I mean, every layer's got something big associated with it. You got WIDA, you got HUD, you got local folks, you got the residents who are looking, saying, is anybody going to, I mean, you got appliances and kitchen cabinets that were put in the buildings in 1978. You got bathrooms before there was ADA. There are a lot of people with walkers that can't get into their bathroom.
Supervisor Buchanan, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Two things. First of all, it sounds to me like the project has been bid previously, and I'm wondering how long those bids are good for. And then secondly, it seems like there's two entities here. There's the housing, there's the county.
Is your mic on, Stan?
I do.
Okay, maybe pull it closer.
Okay.
The people online have a hard time hearing.
The second question would be, it seems like there's two entities here. There's the county and then there's the housing authority. And if the county provides that $3.5 million in funding, it would go to the housing authority, I believe. And then what other responsibilities would the county have, or would the responsibility of upgrading these be strictly the housing authority?
It would be the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority, since its inception in the 70s, has taken care of everything on their own without a dime from Barron County, except for recently we required a full audit, so we participated in that. But other than that, the Housing Authority is stood on its own, and the cash flows and everything are made so that they will continue that way. The county should not have to be involved in this after the ARPA funds are dispersed to them.
So the county should have no further responsibility as
Correct.
far as the county itself.
Yes.
And then what about the time for the bids? How long are they good for?
Well, typically they're good for 60 days, but most contractors will extend them. Costs have not been jumping up as rapidly in today's environment as they were a year ago this time, or 2 years ago this time. So I did ask the general contractor who bid it, you know, if he's getting calls from the subs saying, hey, you know, you either sign this contract or the deal's off, and then we have to rebid it. And as of about this time last week, that hadn't been the case. Now, can we wait 6 months and then go back to the electrician and say, well, you bid this back in January, I assume your price is still good? That would probably be presumptuous, so we'd need to get the bids refreshed. But the scope might change too. That couple $2 million of value engineering could say, let's not do this, and it then would reduce what the scope was they bid. So I'm guessing regardless of what happens, we'll be back talking to the subs. And as Dan pointed out, perhaps the universe needs to be made bigger. The Housing Authority wanted as much of the rehab money to stay local. But if that's not going to work right, then we may have to expand it out. So that'll be a question as well.
Supervisor Cook, you had another question?
Yeah, it's really short. Tom, thank you. You've done a very good job. At least I've gotten value and education out of it. And you told me to write down a number, which I was listening to you, so I didn't write it down. So on the low end, we're talking about a 2 million gap. So from that, on the top end of 12.68, the bottom was 10.5?
About 10.7.
10.7?
Yeah.
And when you talk about that 2 million in the middle, is that 3.5 million all needed? Or could that 3.5 be reduced by any number to make this fall between 10.7 and 12.6?
The short answer is yes. And the reduction would come in two things, well, actually three things. The same scope for less cost, the rebidding, a change in the scope to not do certain things, and then to transfer cost. And if you want to write another number down, I talked about electric baseboard heat. The plan is to leave it in place as emergency heat if something happens. It costs money to take it out. But to put what's called an air-to-air heat pump, which I suspect you're familiar with, the cost to do just the heat pumps in all 70 units, depending upon how much extra stuff in addition to just the HVAC goes, is anywhere from $1.6 million to $2 million.
Okay.
So, you know, this could get real simple by saying, leave the electric baseboard heat in. Now you pulled $1.6 million out, but the residents are going to face electric baseboard heat forever, unless we can perhaps get some solar to replace that. That's the other alternative. Leave the baseboard in, but put enough panels up to generate electricity from the sun to offset the residents. And I've done that in several recent projects. We've been able to reduce the electric bill by, 50 to 60%. But they're going to be solar panels, more than can go on the roofs, because not all the buildings are situated correctly. So there's probably going to be a piece of dirt somewhere in Barron County with some solar panels on that could be producing electricity that's offsetting the residents. And the good part is you got Xcel Energy for everybody outside of Barron, the city of Barron, and you've got Barron Water and Light for in Barron. So there's only two utilities to deal with for that solar offset. But until the money drops here at the end of March and we see what WEDC's rules are, we won't really know how much of that we can score.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Supervisor Efforts?
Yes, could you tell us who the general contractor is?
Well, it's actually a construction manager, not a general contractor, and that's McGann Construction. So the expectation is that they will manage the project. They'll use their balance sheet to pay for the payment and performance bond. They'll coordinate it all, but the only labor that they'll have in the project is when we can't get it locally, or when the cost to get it locally is just, busting the budget.
Supervisor Patty Anderson.
Several months ago, when we were talking about this, I had looked up to see how many sunshiny days we have in Wisconsin, and there's more unsunshiny days than sun. So solar was not my favorite thing, but I wonder, have you entertained any ideas? Is there natural gas available to some of these units that they would do that?
We've looked at two things. Not all of the communities have availability of gas. There is natural gas to Burger Woodland, but it only is used for the hot water heat right now. So there could be more natural gas coming in. As far as the 40 units in the 5 communities, that's kind of a patchwork quilt of what could be done. We did look at geothermal. That's not solar, that's using the ground to heat and cool. Geothermal is nice because it's 24/7, 365. Solar, as you pointed out, is a function of when the sun's out, and when it's not, then you're hooked to the grid and you're using electricity from either Barron or from Xcel. The difficulty with the geothermal was that a lot of the sites are not big enough to put in enough wells. And if you're already concerned about the cost, swallow hard, because geothermal is going to jack it up. There's a lot of federal money for geothermal because it falls under the greenhouse gas emission reduction. Those are the words. Anything that does that has funding largely through Inflation Reduction and the infrastructure properties. So geothermal is the granddaddy of replacement for greenhouse gas reduction. You have the highest greenhouse gas users right now with regard to electric baseboard. So it's a pretty easy argument to make with the Fed to say we're taking out electric and we're going here. But it's costly, and we don't always have enough dirt on the site to put in enough wells.
Any further questions? Supervisor Vaughn?
Going back to the 70 residents, I was under the impression they were going to have to be moved anyway if we do the rehab. So is there any difference between, you mentioned they would need to be moved?
You're correct. The residents will have to be moved, but not for as long.
Okay. And then the other thing is the upper end, 12.8 million. I think we're looking at 17 or close to 18 million for our project as it was. What's the difference between that $5 million?
The difference is hard cost versus soft cost and acquisition cost. And I know Jeff and Louis are going to say, oh no, here he goes again into the weeds. But one of the things that the federal tax credit program allows is for an owner of housing, like the Housing Authority, to create a separate entity, which it needs to create by IRS rules, which is a limited liability company, which will own the property, and that's who actually applies for the tax credits. The Housing Authority can sell its 70 units to this entity. It manages this entity. And the tax law allows the Housing Authority to get tax credits on that sale. It's a non-cash transaction to the equivalent of about $2.8 million. So about half of that distance between the hard cost and the total cost is that acquisition cost. It generates tax credits. It has no cash outlay. The Housing Authority sells its property and it takes back a note. And
in 15 years, they get it back.
In 15 years, they get it back, yeah. This LLC has two entities. It has the tax credit investor who owns 99.9% and the housing authority who owns 0.01. Housing authority is net coming up on the short end. The housing authority doesn't want tax credits because it doesn't pay taxes. So if it can sell tax credits to somebody and get cash, it wants to sell as much as it can. So the typical situation is the housing authority has as small a percentage as the IRS will allow, and the majority of the ownership is the tax credit investor. And as Louis pointed out, at the end of 15 years, the investor goes away and the housing authority owns both pieces, at which time it collapses. The $2.8 million note disappears.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Tom, for educating us and all your work so far. And in a little bit of time, we'll figure out where we're going. So thanks
Thank you
very
for
much.
your time and consideration. Again, I'm sorry for the weeds. I try very hard.
That's
but-
okay. Everybody, got to get an understanding. Thank you. Okay, item number 9, Barron County Housing Authority presentation. Bob.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yep. Why don't you just state your name and title and all that good
Sure.
stuff?
My name is Bob Kazmersky, and as of January 1st of this year, I am succeeding Meg Skemp, our past exceptional executive director for the Barron County Housing Authority. You know, Tom was here. Originally I'd planned to talk about a lot of the comments and questions that were mentioned earlier. In fact, I originally planned to deliver a PowerPoint presentation, not only addressing the project need, but the scope of the project, as well as the funding model and some of the outcomes, positive outcomes of the rehabilitation project. Positive for the 6 communities in which we have a site in. We all want to ensure that this project is as cost effective and as efficient as possible. In fact, that's the goal, to have quality, low-income housing, not only for our residents today, but for future generations. So we've been working on this since 2021. We've pursued many different funding opportunities, looked at different design options. We are cognizant that costs are high. And as you note in SCH's third-party review, they are high. And they're due for a lot of different reasons, which have been mentioned. There's mobilization costs because we have 7 different sites. We all know material costs are high. There's an emphasis to hire local contractors, which not necessarily are the low-cost guys. And then the relocation plan as well. You know, if we were to tackle this project in stages, which we plan to do, then to relocate those residents will be done at 1 wing at a time. So we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks at most in which our residents will be displaced. So it's going to be a really challenging Rubik's Cube. One of the time constraints we're dealing with, because we've experienced a 3-month delay here, is the grant drawdown deadlines. And I mentioned this at the last meeting. Those are fastly approaching. By the way, the grants and the tax credit subsidies represent 57% of the total project costs. Also, we, the Barron County Housing Authority, not Barron County, we are going to have to take out a first mortgage. So this gap financing is something that we'll be responsible for. It's a long-term debt. More than likely, we're going to be, the borrower is going to be WIDA, and it's going to be a burden for us being the Barron County Housing Authority. Currently, we're looking at 23% of the total project costs being that mortgage or gap financing. And then the ARPA piece, which is a really critical piece of the funding pie. That is your contribution, or your, through 4 resolutions, you had sort of supported this project. Without that contribution, without that ARPA contribution, this project is going to be really, really challenging to do. So, I work for the Barron County Housing Authority Board. We've talked about this. We've had to pivot several different times. But so rather than downsizing the project or deferring key elements, because that can still happen, we're looking at perhaps deferring paving the parking lots, not building garages, not building storage units. I know we have some roof issues. Maybe not providing new dishwashers. The heating and HVAC. We have some alternatives with some of the Solar for All programs coming up. Rather than downsizing or deferring those things, the BCHA board has recommended that we pivot and we reapply for the 9% LIHTC credit application. And if that's successful, it secures more federal dollars. If we can piggyback that along with some renewable energy grants, it could potentially help us out as an organization and maybe lower our long-term debt. And most importantly, perhaps, and it's projected to be so, interest rates will be lower, material costs could perhaps go down, and we might not have the labor issues in the future. So hence, the Barron County Housing Authority Board supports the idea of tabling this resolution to a time certain. Any questions?
Supervisor Cook?
Mr. Kaczmarski, again, thank you for coming before the board. So you talked about the grants and tax credits being 57% and the GAP loan 23%. What would be the amount of that loan that the Housing Authority would have to take out?
I don't have that in front of me. Tom, do you? Do you know? For the mortgage? Where's the mortgage at? 3.8 million.
3.8 million. And obviously ours would be the 20% at 3.5 million.
Correct.
Yep, very good, thank you.
Any further questions for Bob? Thanks, Bob. I'm glad you abbreviated your presentation and gave us the high level along with all the other stuff we had prior. So if there's no further questions, what we'll do is move on to, again, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Is to move on to item number 10, the resolution authorizing release of funds, American Rescue Plan ARPA dollars for the Barron County Housing Authority apartment complex rehab, not to exceed $3.5 million. Just so you know, on that resolution that was included in the packet, it says it needs a 2/3 vote. It does not. It needs a majority. Is that correct, John? Okay, so if you you could do that, or it appears based on the recommendation of the Barron County Housing Authority, my personal opinion, Jeff French's personal opinion, that we actually take this resolution as number 10 and actually go to a time certain, which would be May 2025 county board meeting to basically decide this and come up with a little different plan than what we have now. So I guess I'll entertain a motion to at number 10 and go to a time certain, which would be May 2025 county board meeting. Anybody'd like to make that motion?
Carol?
I move that we postpone the release of the ARPA funding minus the amount that has already been used until time certain, which would be May 2025.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. With our new program, we have to enter that in, so that's what Jess is doing. Did you have a question, Bon?
Is there any limit on how long those ARPA dollars can lay around?
Yes, it was 2026. Yeah. Oh, under that 10 million, so we don't have to worry about that either? Okay. Yeah, if it's under the 10 million, there's a lot of restrictions that went away. I didn't realize the time limit was one of them, but, so no. Supervisor Cook.
Yeah, I do support this time starting, and today was I thought, very educational, and hopefully we can look at something different. I feel strongly that obviously these are needed. We need to rehab them. I don't know to the extent of which I think they need to be rehabbed, because I'm with John, Supervisor Banks, I should say, in terms of the cost. You certainly should be able to build these things for new. But as a board, as we go forward, I do think we have to look at, when we allocated this $3.5 million, I mean, we had no idea that our highway shop was going to be $6 million over. We had no idea that the campus HVAC system or heating system was going to go down at 1.5 to 2 million. I knew we were talking about a Sallyport, but we weren't talking 2.5 million or the option that we have, which I support, at 2.2 or 2.3 million. HHS, who knew they were going to leave and it was going to cost us money to put on additional staff, and we are going to have to put on additional staff if they leave, and that's just no two doubts about it. I didn't, when we put this 3.5, again, it was 2 years ago, was my first meeting. I had no idea that our software for for our Health and Human Services was going to cost us 1.2 million. Had I known all those things, I probably wouldn't have voted to go 3.5 million to the Housing Authority. And I don't want to take away the work that Supervisor Moen and Supervisor Nelson have put into this thing, but if there is a way, and it sounds like there are ways to shrink this 3.5 million, I don't know how far, but I think we have to look at if there's some way to shrink that, but still get done what needs to be done in terms of making sure these units are still modern and can sustain another 40 years. We have to do that, but we have to make hard choices. I take this, I use this analogy. There's a family that put away $30,000 for a newer used car and on planned vacation. And then all of a sudden, their furnace goes out. Where do they have to get that money? They have to make a hard choice. And then their septic tanks goes out. At the end of the day, they don't get a newer used car. The hard choice is that they had to fix their house, and their vacation is a one-day trip to Silver Lake. And I think that's how we have to look at this project. There's some hard choices here.
It's noted, Randy, and our Supervisor Cook, and everybody here has heard what he said. The Housing Authority has, but that'll be up to the Housing Authority and Tom to come up with a cash flow and come up with a project for us next year. So we do it. Supervisor Moen?
I think that we also have to consider that Barron County is required to provide housing for the residents of Barron County. And if we let this go down, we're going to have an awful expense at a certain time. And we have more people that are going to be needing housing, and we are not a high-income area. A lot of us, a lot of people have moved back to the area after retiring from their other previous jobs, and they're going to be needing housing too.
Supervisor Gores?
My question here is, if we put this off, is this going to escalate the price on this or not?
Probably. But there's a lot of other items that we previously mentioned that could bring it down. But yes, they probably.
I understand that.
I would guess
I
that it
just
will.
wanted to let everybody know that, what do you call it, we're probably going to look at inflation.
Yep. Any further questions? If not, we've got a motion by Supervisor Moen, a second by Supervisor Cook to stand. Do you have another question?
Just if you defer it to the May 25th date, can you not make a decision before that if something comes up?
I'm sure we can. If we can do it, ahead of time.
Do it ahead of time.
But we got to do something by then.
Okay.
Correct under Robert's Rules of Order, anybody that votes in the affirmative can ask for reconsideration, and that reconsideration can take place after this meeting. So if, as I put in my update, if we have any other information, anybody who votes in the affirmative can bring it back onto the floor for reconsideration.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to approve this to a time certain of May 2025. Any further discussion? Not, let's vote. Pete's giving a thumbs up, I know.
It's those voting online who we're waiting for, but I see
Pete and Stacy both gave a thumbs
both
up.
thumbs up. Thank you.
Okay, that passed by a majority vote with 27 yes and 2 absent. Thank you. So we'll deal with this later. Item number 11, presentation on the multi-agency response event. Our Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and Stacy, Head of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, we just wanted to give you a brief update on some positive things. We're not even asking for money. So that's a good thing. And this didn't cost us much money, or very little, if any. That was just a joke. No. Next time I come up, though. But this was a very positive event. We talk a lot about prevention and measuring prevention, and that we can't give you a dollar amount on this event, but this was a huge event. This is the second time it's occurred in Barron County. We held it at the Rice Lake Cedar Mall. It's a multi-agency resource event. Basically, we brought all of these, and Stacy's going to talk about the staff that did this and the people that we brought. Well, we brought all these people into the Cedar Mall. We just used the Cedar Mall because they had space for us at no cost. And people could come and get services. If you needed services from transportation to housing to beds in your room to any services that DHS provides to dentistry to haircuts, you could get it all in one spot. It wasn't you came in and said, hey, call this number when you get back home. The people had to be there, and they got these services right now. This has been a dream of our Community Coalition Committee for years. This is the second time we pulled it off. We've helped over 200 families, and they might not need services in Barron County. And that's the goal of this committee and obviously our organization. So we've helped 200 people. Maybe they needed a bed. Maybe they don't need services from the county anymore. Maybe they've gotten the job now and they've gotten the housing. So this is just a proactive, preventative event that we wanted to tell you about. There was a great article in the Barron News Shield and some of our other local newspapers. I mean, they got food, they got housing, they got job help, they've got any help that they wanted, medical help. But it's a preventative event that zero cost. I mean, their staff time went into it, our staff time went into it, but maybe in the long run, we've cut some of the costs of the county, and we just wanted to tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, we had some of our staff, Sarah Turner, she's our prevention specialist from Health and Human Services, Alyssa Lammers from the ADRC, Bonnie Romehild, she's our economic support manager, and then Carla Potts-Schufelt, she is our public health manager. They were very instrumental in this project, and Chris mentioned we've talked about this for years, and actually where the idea came from is following the tornado. We did a slight modification of this when we were at Mosaic in Cameron, because we found that people lost lots of things, from driver's license to their medication to eyeglasses to, maybe their savings account, those types of things. And so we had put together an abbreviated event following the weeks of the tornado to try to get people back on their feet. And so we've been discussing this type of an event since then. And so it's really pretty exciting to be able to pull this off. I'm going to read you the list of folks that were involved in this, and I know it's long, but I think it's important for all of you to recognize that, again, as the sheriff mentioned, lots of people came together. It didn't necessarily cost these organizations additional money other than the time and the staff that they put into it. So Health and Human Services, ADRC, the Sheriff's Department, Embrace, Benjamin's House, the Job Center, Namacoggin Transit, the Free Clinic, Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul, Mayo Health System, Marshfield Health System, Prevea Health System was at our first event, West Cap, Barron County Developmental Services, Northwest Connections, Living Waters Church, Rice Lake Public Library, Project Search, the Division of Voc Rehab, Sleep and Heavenly Peace, Vivint Health, Northwood Tech, their cosmetology program, Head Start. We had both a Spanish and Somali interpreter services on hand, North Lakes Community Clinic, Heart Island Family Enrichment Center, UW Extension, West Cap, Goodwill, Judicare, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. So that's a lot of providers in our community. And as the sheriff also mentioned, you know, we're hoping that this helps some of these people not have to knock on our doors. Maybe it was a one-stop shop. They were able to get their immediate needs met and not have to come knocking on the doors of these agencies for further services. The other thing we did is we started tracking what were the top needs and what needs were needing to be met at this event. And we found that 27 of the households that came were in need of some type of housing assistance. 27 households also in need of some type of clothing assistance, and then 25 in need of some type of food stability or food assistance. So those were our top 3 areas that we tracked that people came for. Which is interesting because it does line up with our community health improvement plan that we have for public health that we look at to our community for. And then just a couple other little things, 9 beds were given away to children. There is a program through Heavenly Sleep that they provide beds for children who don't have beds to sleep on. So 9 beds were given away. We filled our recovery coaches caseload. 4 car seats were given away. We could have given away more car seats. However, we ran out. We also gave out 5 boxes of Narcan, and 11 haircuts were provided. So just an example of some of the services that were provided. Any questions or any follow-up you want to give?
Any questions on that?
Anybody have any questions on this? If not, I just want to thank both you two and your staff for everything you've done here. That's, you know, you not only helped those people, you helped your county, and that's another reason why Barron County is the best county to live in. So thank you. Item number 12. Resolution authorizing the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire Barron County campus staff to apply for and administer a Wisconsin Public Service Commission and Wisconsin Office of Energy Innovation Rural Energy Startup Program and Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, Activity 3, the Energy Audits and Building Grant Updates. This will require a 2/3 or 20 members to pass this resolution. Motion by Supervisor Turcott, seconded by Supervisor Hanson. Do we have any questions on this?
Abby's here if you
Well,
have
Abby,
questions.
would you like to address the board?
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. I'm going to get into the grant, but before I do, I want to give you a brief update on campus. Is that all right? If I
Yes, you want to introduce yourself and your people with you.
Absolutely. So good morning, I'm Abby Fisher. I am the campus director at UW-Eau Claire Barron County, and this morning I am joined by 2 staff members from the UW-Eau Claire campus. I've got Lily Strelo, sustainability coordinator for our entire institution, also Troy Terhark, director of facilities for our entire institution. I'm very happy they were able to make the drive up this morning, so thank you both for joining us. I just want to give an update. Campus is doing great. We're on spring break this week, and so students are off enjoying it while the professors are grading them. Midterm grades are due on Wednesday when we get back, and I'm hoping it's better than last semester. But they're doing all right. Facility-wise, winter has been kind to us, and so the heating system has made it through the winter. I'm happy to announce no problems. And Troy Terhark and the team, and overseeing our team at the Barron campus, has done a fabulous job. Facilities are in good condition. Looking forward to next year, our enrollment numbers, our deposits for next fall are looking similar to this past fall, so we're pretty pleased with that. And lastly, I just wish to say that Chancellor Schmidt is coming to Rice Lake next Thursday morning to meet with local employers. To talk about how we can work together to recruit and retain students and employees in our region. And so our institution is committed to this county and committed to continuing to provide an educational opportunities for people throughout our area. So just give you that update. We're here this morning because there is a grant opportunity, and I apologize for the short notice. There's a grant opportunity through the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin Original due date was January. We had not applied, but we found out recently that there's still money. They extended the deadline, which means there's money, and they're looking for people to apply. This grant, this Rural Energy Startup Program, would provide up to $75,000 with no match required from the university or from the county to potentially do an audit of our buildings. And when I say our buildings, I really do mean our buildings, because the UW-Eau Claire Barron County buildings are owned by the county. Those are Barron County facilities. We just maintain it for you. And so this $75,000 would help us potentially do an audit of our facilities to see, to look at our energy efficiency and look for improvements. But I'm going to turn it over to the people who know more about this, and they can, we're all here to answer your questions, but I'll have Lily speak to it.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. This grant is an opportunity to help these buildings continue to be maintained well. It could provide sort of a roadmap of potential improvements, but there's no requirement to then implement those improvements. So we'd get sort of a list back of, you know, ways that we could save money on utility bills and, you know, help these buildings last and maintain them well so that we don't have larger issues down the road. Troy, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Troy Terhart. You know, we look at things like the gaskets and seals around windows and doors, you know, the types of things that to do an audit to say, okay, what investment can we make through this grant, or what should be on our list of things to do to make sure we can, you know, maintain them, reduce utility costs over time. So
One of these was done at Eau Claire recently, right?
We did recently complete a long-range utility planning process at UW-Eau Claire, and we are really excited about the results. This plan would be similar. It would not focus on as wide a scope. It would be a little more narrowly defined to really look at, like Troy was saying, where can we tighten up the existing building and make sure that we're being really efficient with our utilities, making sure that these buildings are being maintained well. And again, to be a roadmap for how to do the next steps in that and how to prioritize the potential actions you can take. Because I'm sure you all know with a building, there's always dozens of improvements you could make, and this will help us determine, you know, what should we focus on first and most, you know, prioritize.
Supervisor Cook.
Can any of the 75,000, when you talk about, you know, around doors and windows, can any portion of the 75,000 be used to make those recommended improvements? Or is it just strictly the audit?
I think it technically you could have implementation for this grant, but the funding amount isn't enough. It would not go that far, particularly when combined with just identifying those projects. That's why we focused on the analysis itself.
And then, so we get this list, is it coming back to the county board? Is the Eau Claire University looking at it? How does that work?
It would be joint, and so county will actually have to submit the grant. Counties are eligible to submit this, and so county would get the report from the assessor, which we would talk about together.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Hanson.
And who, do you look at it yourselves, or do you hire contractors to look at it? Who does the work?
Yeah, so the county would subaward the grant to the university and we would hire the contractor. One of our goals with this application is to make sure that county staff are doing as little work as possible so that, you know, it doesn't add more to your summer workload with your utilities and facilities staff.
Any further questions? Again, as I travel around the state and I have my other county board chair counterparts, a lot of them are dealing with the closing of their two-year campus. This is just another example of why our Barron County and Eau Claire are working together and furthering our educational facility in Rice Lake. So just like to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes. Audrey, or Supervisor Gooselake, you had a question?
Yes, I would just like to have before we vote on it, line 51, the typo fixed. Jeff's aware of it.
Any further questions? Thanks, Audrey. All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote.
We are waiting on Stacy Newman.
Okay, that passed by a 2/3 vote with 27 yes and 2 absent. So that resolution is carried. Item number 13, the rezoning petitions. As you know, with our new system, we have to separate it out because if we try to do them all at once and then somebody wanted to separate them, we'd have issues. So we have to go one at a time. So the first item will be 13A, a zoning ordinance amendment. Establish a zoning district, the town of Prairie Lake. David P. Thiesfeld and Karen Canfield are owners, the town of Prairie Lake petitioner. Motion by Supervisor Cook, seconded by Supervisor Heller. Is there any questions or concerns? Not, let's vote. That passed by a majority vote, 27 yes and 2 absent. Thank you. Item 13B through 13G all relate to the Town of Cedar Lake zoning request. I got to say that I understand the complexity of this issue in that it is a housing development and things have been controversial in this area. But I do believe our zoning committee did a fine job of vetting this. They met several hours. They visited the sites, and I guess it's a tough issue, and I feel sorry for the people who are involved and are still involved in these matters. But the first thing we've got is 13B, resolution to deny the zoning request, Town of Cedar Lake. Jeffrey Allen Biggett, Susan Marie Biggett, and Dustin Richard Biggett, owners, Town of Cedar Lake. Ken Letters, chair, petitioner for Lot 39. Motion by Supervisor Gooslake, seconded by Supervisor Moen. Is there any questions or concerns about this denial? Supervisor Hanson.
If we vote yes, we're denying, is that correct?
Correct. Any further questions? Not, let's vote. (27 yes, 2 absent, passed by majority. Item 13C, resolution to deny the zoning request. Town of Cedar Lake. Jeffrey Allen Biggett, Susan Marie Biggett, and Dustin Richard Biggett, owners. Town of Cedar Lake. Ken Letters, chair, petitioner for Lot 30. Oh, excuse me, I didn't go down for Lot 30, 37, and 38. Anybody want to make a motion?
Got a motion.
Okay, somehow mine's not doing it. All right. You said Supervisor Patty Anderson and Supervisor Heller was a second. Okay. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote. Thanks. Passed 27 yes and 2 absent. Thank you. Item 13D, resolution to deny zoning request, Town of Cedar Lake. John F. Bowles, owner, Town of Cedar Lake. Ken Leonard's chair, petitioners for Lot 36. Motion by Supervisor Gooslake, seconded by Supervisor Cook. Any questions? Not, let's vote. Passed 27 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. 13E, resolution to deny zoning request. Town of Cedar Lake, Mary M. Eckrite, irrevocable trust, owner. Town of Cedar Lake, Ken Leonard's chair, petitioner, lot 35. Motion by Supervisor Gore, seconded by Supervisor Heller. Any additional questions? Not, let's vote. That resolution carried, 27 yes and 2 absent. Okay, item number 13F. Resolution to deny zoning request. Town of Cedar Lake, Ernest L. and Amber R. Hall, owners. Town of Cedar Lake, Ken Leonard's chair, petitioner, lot 40. Motion by Supervisor Thompson, seconded by Supervisor Heller. Any questions? Not, let's vote. The resolution carried, 27 yes, 2 absent. Okay, item 13G, resolution to deny zoning request. Town of Cedar Lake, Ernest L. and Amber R. Hall, owners. Town of Cedar Lake, Ken Letters, chair, petitioner, lot 41. Motion by Supervisor Gooselik, seconded by Supervisor Heller. Any concerns? Not, let's vote. That passed, 27 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Item number 14 on the agenda, the resolution authorizing sale of the Barron County Office Complex, 410 East LaSalle Avenue, Barron, Wisconsin. This will take a majority vote. Motion by Supervisor Moen, seconded by Supervisor Efforts. Anybody have a question on this? Jeff had a lot of detail in our packet and the memo. Supervisor Gores.
Is this look like a very saleable building to, so to speak, or desirable building to sell or to buy or whatever?
I guess we'll know at the end of the auction.
Okay. All right.
Any further questions? Supervisor Patty Anderson.
I had a question. I think I read that if it doesn't sell, we still have $3,500 that we have to pay them. And so, and then is there a reserve?
Reserve was discussed with the property committee, no reserve.
Okay.
And yes, you're correct, $3,500 because they're going to be advertising and do a lot of other things. So yes, we would be in fixed costs at that point.
Supervisor Cook.
Jeff and I spoke briefly on this thing. I agree with the sale of this thing. I don't know why we're in the rental business. I think government should be limited to doing what government's supposed to do, and being in the rental business isn't one of them. Hopefully, we get this thing sold and we make some money on it.
Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Virtual, Stacy?
She goes yes. Okay, it passed by a majority vote, 27 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Okay, item number 15, resolution, salary of the Barron County Clerk, Register of Deeds, and Treasurer for 2025 to 2028. This will require a majority. All right, don't vote yet, or don't make a motion. Yeah, that happened to me too. Okay, motion by Supervisor Gores, seconded by Supervisor Banks. Any questions or concerns on the elected officials' future salaries? Not, let's vote. Passed by a majority, 27 yes and 2 absent. Thank you. Item number 16, resolution authorizing the use of a contingency fund, aging kitchen ARPA funds, and a transfer of 2024 capital improvement outlay, SISOP funds for the purchasing of and installing a new boiler at the Barron County Government Center. I believe this will require a 2/3 vote. And just to clarify, because there was some questions about it, they're getting $150,000 from the SISOP budget, and they're getting $150,000 from the leftover money in the kitchen project, which basically had about $196,000 surplus. The $46,000 that's in there is, I think, going to be returned back to the general fund if that number holds. Okay.
Sorry, back to ARPA.
Oh, back to ARPA? Oh, okay. Okay. Is that new ones with Anderson and Heller on this one? Okay, motions by Supervisor Bob Anderson, seconded by Supervisor Heller, question by Supervisor Guselik.
So do we know what the estimate is for the new boilers? Is that going to cover it?
Excuse me? Yeah, Steve does believe that this would be enough to get started to go down the road, Audrey, to get what he needs, because he also is looking at purchasing a high-volume pump to move more water over to the old jail and some valves. This would be something to get started. We have 2 boilers here, and this would be, we'll get going for 1 boiler or 2, depending on the prices. Hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schradel. You want to go into your mic there, Bill?
Property committee here, but now these are original equipment, I assume?
No, there were actually Wisconsin boilers. This is the second reiteration. We had huge Wisconsin boilers years ago. These were put in 29 years ago, so they're much smaller, and we think the next, Steve is telling me he thinks the next ones will be smaller and more efficient.
Well, another thing about them, because my brother was in the heating business, and a lot of these older units, no matter what type, they can't get parts for them.
We can't get parts for what we have.
So we got to do it.
Any further questions? If not, let's vote. Passed by a 2/3 vote, 27 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Item number 17. Now, on the resolution, it says a majority, but I just confirmed with Corp Counsel, we need 2/3. So it's a resolution authorizing Barron County Justice Center, Sallyport Garage, and Visitation Room study and use of unassigned fund balance of $422,575. And at the present time, it's coming out of the fund balance. That's why it's going to require a 2/3 vote. The plan is presently, and until Jeff gets there, is to repay it when we borrow. So there's a lot of things to consider, as Supervisor Cook mentioned earlier. Okay, motion by Supervisor Buchanan, seconded by Supervisor Heller, question by Supervisor Cook.
Okay, I can't, it's been in the last 6-7 months. We had a resolution where we did some study on the Sallyport. How does this differ?
That was the $12,000 to hire the firm, Wold, to do the initial plan to get us the options. Now we've narrowed those options down to option 4, which is the one that's in your packet. And now this $422,575 is to not start the project, do the soil testing, get the plans in place, get a document that's with the exact numbers. Wold is on the line here. They're available, Joel and Jake from Wold. We've been working on this project for a while. This is the next step in that project. We spent $12,000. Now we're looking for the $422,000, which is actually part of the $2.1 million. So we'll repay that $422,000 back when we borrow to the general fund. So.
Very good.
Okay, and just so you know, I had a couple of Barron County taxpayers come up to me and say, "What the heck? $422,000 for fees. I said, no, there's a lot. That's all the soft costs.
That's the soil testing. We're looking at a culvert that's outside their building. You know, we wanted to pay for this project up front. We have a better way to use the out-of-county revenue funds that we have been saving for years. Jody and Jeff came up with a way better plan to benefit the citizens of Barron County, so we're using that this way. So now we'd have to borrow for this project. Our goal was to pay for this project, but we're going to run it the same way the project ran the kitchen. Supervisor Buchanan has been instrumental in the design fees. Supervisor Turcott, with his building experience, will on our law enforcement committee, and Steve Olson are going to manage this project or head up this project, with Tim Evanson, our captain, and the state jail inspector have to be involved in this because the state jail inspector has to sign off on this project. So this is the first step. The 422,575 is for the testing, the plans, everything in place so that we can have a number that we can stamp, and then we'll be under that number when we build this.
Just for the people online and anybody else can, just to document, the last page of the questions that we had to Wold Architectural had a list of all the different items. You know, there's about 20 or 30 of them. So it isn't just fees. So, and I believe Wold Architectural and Engineering Firm has someone online, Joel, if anybody has any questions. Supervisor Schradel.
Mike. Chris, what, do you have any, I suppose it's got to go out on bids, right? You don't have any idea what it's going to be. I mean, rough.
They gave us that, Wold Architect gave us an estimation of 2.12 million.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or concerns? Okay, if not, let's vote. That passed by a 2/3 vote, 27 yes, 2 absent. So thank you. And thanks for being online, Joel.
Thanks, Joel and Jake.
Okay, item number 18, resolution approving a multi-hazard mitigation plan for Barron County.
I think we want to show this, or at least.
Okay, but I still want to, motion by Supervisor Olson, seconded by Supervisor Heller. This has been headed up by Mike Judy, our emergency management director, and it was headed, basically overseen by West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning. There were a lot of communities involved from all over Barron County, so.
Yeah, and we're going to post this on our website if it's approved today. This comes from the West Central Regional Planning Committee. This is a 400-page document. That's why we didn't hand it out. This is what we do, what Mike does every day for people to get grants, and I'll let him give a 2-minute spiel on it.
Good morning, guys.
We won't even put a clock on you, Mike.
I'll speak fast. Last year, the countywide mitigation plan it reached about 4 years old per FEMA. We have to update that plan every 4 years in order to qualify for state and federal grant funding. So in 2023, we applied for FEMA grant an amount of $33,750. We contracted with the Planning Commission. We received the grant, or we were approved for the grant, to 75-25 match. So Chris Strait and I met with a significant amount of municipalities, nonprofit organizations, county departments, and local volunteer agencies to gather the information needed to update everything to have this year's plan to be the updated plan. We're trying to work enough to meet the $11,250 needed for our buy-in, so we don't have anything out of pocket. We're still working toward that. So if the board approves this today, then we send that back to Chris Strait, and then he'll compile the numbers to make sure to see where we're at regarding the grant and the project closeout costs. But we're trying to meet that $11,250, so we don't have any out-of-pocket buy-in.
We have there's townships, school districts need this to apply for grants. There will be a school district and a township applying for grants off of this plan, and they need this plan to apply for those grants, or any future grants will need it too.
Any questions? Seeing none, let's vote. That passed by a majority vote of 27 yes and 2 absent. Thank you. Back? Okay, item number 19, Resolution 2024 Work Zone Awareness Week in Barron County. And this is something we do every year and very worthwhile. Motion by Supervisor Thompson, seconded by Supervisor Nelson. Any questions or concerns? Not, let's vote. Passed by a majority vote, 27 yes and 2 absent. Thanks. Item number 20, ordinance creating section 50-6 of Article 1 of the Barron County Code of Ordinances regarding sale of tax deeded land to municipalities. This is something that our treasurer and our corp counsel has come up with, and I believe they've got a pretty good detail on that. That's a motion by Supervisor Rogers, second by Supervisor Heller. Is there any questions or concerns on this ordinance? Seeing none, let's vote. That passed by a majority vote, 27 yes and 2 absent. Thank you. Item number 21, progress and financial update on the highway facilities. I believe in your packet, Jody had prepared a document dated 2/29/2024 that showed we had basically we've got a remaining balance of $101,214. Now, as Supervisor Cook is going to ask me, have the data controls been factored into this project yet? No, they have not. Last time that I got a number, it was in the 225 to 250 range, possibly. Also, if you look onto this schedule, about 2/3 of the way down, you'll see press, brake, drill, shear, and lathe that has 241,000 there. That could be, I don't think any that's allocated for anything. I think we've got that money. That's detail. Oh, they don't see that detail? Okay. But, and I think Lance has done an excellent job with the IT. So right now I can say I think we're gonna meet our budget. So I don't see us going over. Is there any questions of me? Or I know it's slow. There's still some punch list items that we do have one Hudson Electrical. It's a little more, about 84,000. Is that still out there, Jody? Okay, so we're down. The biggest one is about 40,000. So we're getting close, and we got a beautiful facility that we'll tour sometime this year. Okay, Supervisor Schradel.
I don't know what I'd do without you. So, anyway, a guy out in my district asked if there's any sunset on this as far as a punch list and number of other things. And I said, I have no idea, so I'll ask at the meeting here.
It's getting close. I know last highway meeting I was there, I asked that question, and it's just, you're getting right down to the end. There's a little bit of a grind, but what do you think, couple months? Hopefully.
Okay, I'll extend it to 3, that maybe it'll satisfy.
Yeah, that's good. Go 4 if you want.
4.
Okay, item number 22, American Rescue Plan ARPA expenditures. Again, Jody had a handout or in our packet, shows we have 1.160 plus of amount available. At the present time, we're kind of looking at that for the HHS software. So is there any questions of Jody on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to 23, report from our Barron County Administrator.
All right, the first thing Jody's going to display is what out-of-county prisoner revenue used to cost the county before we built the Justice Center. The point that I'm bringing all of this up is government does not operate like business. Business operates by the quarter. Mr. Menches, I've heard him say many times, the difference between government and business is business operates on a quarter. We operate on a quarter of a century. Prior to the building of the Justice Center, we spent the last year before the Justice Center was fully in operation, we spent $616,925.38 in transportation costs and boarding costs to house out-of-county prisoners. In fact, if you were here then, you know that the Dunn County Board of Supervisors did not want us to build a jail because we were paying for their jail, and they were very happy to have us. So we're collecting in excess of $440,000 of out-of-county prisoner revenue. That means that's $1 million swing in economics and cash flow to the county. Now, unless my accounting professor was lying to me, that's more than $1.298. These are some big numbers. We have to take in effect when we look at things, whether it's at the campus or any place else. We've got to take the long look around here. 85% of all the fixed assets of the county are in roads, bridges, aids, and culverts. So only 15% or less is in land and buildings and things that we control. So it's important to understand that a spreadsheet like this speaks volumes to the right decision that was made when many of you weren't even in the seat. The next one goes to this. The next spreadsheet that Jody's going to show you is the unfunded pension liability interest payments that the Barron County used to pay. The young gentleman over here to my right, Mr. Mensch, and I worked on this extensively. We're going to go on to a couple of these spreadsheets. I want to go through the numbers here of what we'd have been paying. Keep going, Jody. That was breakdown by department savings. This spreadsheet here, if we get into this, we were going to be paying by the year 2012, over a decade ago, we'd have been paying $1.5 million in accumulated interest at 8% on the unfunded pension liability of the Wisconsin retirement system. Back in 1952 or 53, when the county board went into the Wisconsin retirement system, they picked up all the unfunded pension liability of all the people that had retired from the early 1930s on. The state of Wisconsin was charging 8% interest on this. Was charging 8% interest. So extrapolating out to today, put it this way. You think we're having a hard time coming up with our budget? Where would we cut another 1.8 million bucks to pay the interest on this retirement pension? That's why long-term planning pays off. This was a great move by the county board. Lots of people were upset about building the Justice Center, but 20-some years in hindsight, good move. As far as in reference to our unfunded pension liability, very simple break-even analysis that even at the minimum payments, we're saving $611,000. So I just wanted to drive that home. As Abraham Lincoln so eloquently said when he addressed Congress in 1862, he said, "What we do today is not altogether for today, but rather for a vast tomorrow." And that's the truth. In government, we should be looking very, very long-term. Item 23C is the closeout of the aging ADRC kitchen. We're under budget. Good job with that committee. We're actually going to have a final closeout meeting on 5/9 that will end all of the check points on that, and we'll have that wrapped up. Any questions for me other than I have the appointment of Mr. Edwardson to replace Shay Horton on the Housing Authority? All right, thank you.
Can I get a motion to approve that appointment for the Barron County Housing Authority, Doug Edwardson, to replace Shay Horton? Motion by Supervisor Rogers, seconded by Supervisor Heller. Any concerns? Not, let's vote. That passed by a majority, 27 yes, 2 absent. 25, claims, petitions, and correspondence. We have none. 26, suggestions for future agenda items. Jeff had some in the packet, and there's still anything to add to that? No. Okay. Next meeting is Tuesday, April 16th at 9 a.m. for our organizational meeting. So some of you won't be here, and we're going to miss you, and we'll have some new ones to hopefully educate. As on item number 27, by unanimous consent, we will adjourn at 10:54.